I'm Michael Elliott. And our next guest is Scott McCormick, President of the Connected Vehicle Trade Association. Welcome, Scott. So, Scott, for our audience, could you kind of just describe, who you are, your role, your expertise in this area, and how this all came to be?
In very quickly, in 2000, all the automakers wanted to create a group to define how devices would communicate inside the vehicle. So they formed an organization which they brought me in as executive director of, and we created about 4,000 pages of specifications for how devices would communicate. The Bluetooth hands-free profile came out of that group, the SA common message set. At the end of that time in 2004, we sat down with the automakers and said, now that you've consented on communicating inside the vehicle, you need to communicate outside the vehicle and agree on how that process is going to occur. So we created a new organization called the VII Consortium, wrote a $54 million cooperative agreement between the federal government and that group to develop what's now being seen as part of the rulemaking process. And that was 10 years ago. About that time, they also realized that the automakers really truly only understood and interacted with the tier ones, the Delphis, the Bosches, the Magneti Marellis. But they knew that everyone had to be participating that was going to be part of the whole ecosystem. So you had to have networking and switching as well as backhaul and communication companies. So they asked if I would form a trade association so that all 12 industries at the time that we knew of could participate equitably in the design build out of the system. And now there's 17 different industry groups that are represented by CVTA. And we do the traditional trade association activities. We have workshops, we have meetings, we engage people to participate in the activities that are going on, both at a public and at a private level.
Okay, now you sit with or related into the Department of Transportation, is that correct?
Well, personally, I have a number of other roles. I'm a trusted advisor to the EU, the Chinese, the Japanese governments. In 2012, Congress appointed me as one of the 6 industry advisors to the Secretary of Transportation to advise them on what research they should be doing, what areas of study they should undertake, what they should be spending their money on.
So you have extensive expertise in this area then, is that correct?
I'm old.
That's a polite way of saying that. So, the connected vehicle space has really reached, broad market consumer awareness. What do you kind of see as those next steps?
Well, it's as one of my board members mentioned the other night, that after 15 years, we've become an overnight success. We have a lot of things that still have to be done. On a technical level, understand that this is new technology. Communication over a new communication protocol, the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum, no one has done in a production capacity. And when you look at the fact that they're looking to do a rulemaking to require safety message sets to be broadcast and received from all the vehicles starting in a few years, you're now looking at a case where this has not been deployed and there's not been a robustness determined about either the communication protocol or the hardware. So there's a lot of work to do now to get to that point. The second aspect that we have to look at is the ubiquityness of it. When you buy a car and it has a service with it, you expect that to work everywhere, whether you're driving west of Oklahoma City or in the canyons of Chicago. And so all those different kinds of conditions have to be modeled and tested in all varieties and types and makes and models of cars in order for you to get to the point. Because the last thing, if you're an automaker or an aftermarket supplier, want to have happen is have this equipment not work for you when you need it.
Right.
Another thing that we have to do is securing the data. Now, we know how to secure the communication itself. But now that you're talking about not just safety messages, but automakers opening up their APIs for third-party developers, now you've got a lot of other information that may be available in the car. It may have your credit card information for tolling purposes. It may have your origin and destination location. All of that needs to be secured so that others can't get it, or reasonably can't get it, and it can't be corrupted, if you will, because that's the same as your car. One big aspect of that, of the things that they're looking at with regard to that is once you open a communication portal into the car, now you have an opportunity for other means of other bad things to happen. We the public hype tends to be around whether there's a malicious threat, but the bigger threat is actually software collisions. If you look at it, the Boeing 767 had 4 million lines of code. The latest Audi that came out had 20 million lines of code. Now, imagine that the last operating system that one of the major producers came out with had 100,000 known bugs when they released it. You can't have those kinds of collisions going on because that again affects the quality of service, the perceived quality of the vehicle itself. And so those software collisions are important to realize. There's a lot of talk about data ownership, but that really is going to be defined by the automakers, because my analogy is that if I buy a television with a remote, I may not want the government or the car maker or my wife to know what channels I'm watching, but that doesn't give me the rights to the data stream coming out of that remote. That's probably proprietary to the equipment manufacturer.
Right, and that really brings into where does the consumer come in to all this, and ownership of what they've done and how they've driven, and that kind of big brother aspect.
Well, it's interesting because what we do now, and the closest analogy is your cell phone. You download an app and you opt into allowing it to have certain information. And the car makers are thinking that, well, okay, if that's what we want to do, that's probably the reasonable aspect to say, let's opt into this activity. The issue with that is going to be educating people about what data is collected, how it's aggregated, not used as yours personal, but as this group of travelers or this type of cars or whatever, so that they can extract useful knowledge out of it. The other issue is that I've never met a person that actually read what they were accepting when they opted into downloading an app.
Right. Agreed. So, final question just from me. What should consumers start to expect or start to see that's going to impact whether it's the safety of how they're driving or the knowledge of where they're going and information around that? What will we start to really see? What is going to impact the consumer?
What we're seeing, and this is from some very recent studies that came out, is that almost 55% of the car buyers, if they don't have the technology in the car that they want, whether they understand completely what it is or not, they go shop another brand. That's new to the car industry, because now all of a sudden they're saying, well, if we don't have this technology in the car, we're going to lose market share, which we haven't lost because of that reason before, because everyone pretty much had the same capability. So now a lot of it's going to be driven by what comes to market first, what is it that I understand that I want, and part of that, the big part of that is really in terms of education. If you have an app in your car, and you go have a problem with it, well, if you have an app on your phone, you have a problem with it, you throw it away, you get another one or one that looks just like it. If you have one on your car that has a problem, who do you call? Do you take it into the dealer? They're not likely to understand that. And one of the reasons that's a huge concern is that the Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE International and CVTA have looked at what the potential employment possibilities are from both the connected and the near-term automated vehicle aspect. And there's an estimated 500,000 jobs just in this country alone that's going to be created. And one of the big problems is that there's no way to get a baseline understanding of this spectrum because it's so large. And so what CVTA and SAE are doing, we've created a connected vehicle professional credentialing course where people, students, engineers, insurance companies, data companies that want to get into the space can come in and understand what are the functions, what are the communication protocols, what are the devices, both mobile or aftermarket or internal, what is it that I need to understand if I'm now going to be part of that environment.
Very good. Well, Scott, thank you very much for joining us today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.